or being.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Changemakers podcast, where we chat with interesting and engaging individuals here and far about change, making change, living change in their own lives, how they've experienced unimaginable change, and innovative ways people uplift the lives of others. We chat about triumphs over tragedies, mindset matters, and how we live out our life's purpose inspirationally. So please join us to be inspired and empowered to be the change you want to see in this world. You know, we can all be change makers in our lives. Here's to the change you're about to bring forth. I could not be more delighted to welcome our guest today, Nicole Auerbach. Is that how we pronounce it?
Yes, that's right.
Oh, wonderful. So Nicole, I'm so delighted. She hails from Chicago, I believe. Is that correct?
Well, I actually hail from Maryland, just outside of D.C., but I've been living in Chicago for so long that I think I have to just say yes. I think most people would say, not only do I hail, but I've been here long enough that I suppose I'm a true Midwesterner.
Gotcha. Well, so we are so delighted to welcome Nicole today. And she has a very interesting story. I can't wait to share it with our listeners. And so we're going to just jump right in. Nicole, I'd love for you to share with our listeners a bit about yourself, your professional passion, and a few insights into your professional journey.
Sure. Thanks, Kimberly. I'm thrilled to be here. I love the opportunity to speak with people about what I'm doing and about the legal industry, and I love the marketing aspects and all of the other things that go along with it, and so I'm really happy to be a part of this. So to tell you about myself, I think it's funny since you asked where I hail from. You know, when I start and people say, you know, tell me about yourself, I often really start literally at the beginning and just tell people something that they don't know about me, which is I was born on my parents' bed in the house that I grew up in Maryland, because I always say that I was too impatient to wait for the ambulance to come and take me to the hospital, much to my parents' chagrin. And that has sort of defined me, I think, from the beginning of my life, is in that I'm not a terribly patient person, although it's something I've worked on forever, and getting much better in my old age. But I think that also I just had a lot of stuff that I wanted to accomplish, and so that has kind of defined a little bit more my professional career. But, you know, in terms of my legal career, I went to law school in Chicago, and I came out and worked in a large law firm in Chicago for 15 years. I was a partner in the litigation department, and it was a really great background and really great way to learn the trade and also learn how business works from that standpoint, with sophisticated clients and large cases, and working with you know, an enormous number of really talented people, both in the firm and also opposing counsel and people that you interacted with. But in 2008, I really felt that the industry was missing a huge opportunity for customers in terms of the options for billing arrangements, and I joined forces with a few other people who felt strongly about wanting to bring about an option for clients, and we formed a firm called Valorem Law Group, which has been in effect for almost 11 years, and we brought the alternative fee arrangements, we brought that to the market, particularly for sophisticated litigation. And that wasn't enough for us in terms of trying to be disruptors of the legal industry. And so a year ago, one of my founding partners in Valorem and I formed a firm called ElevateNext Law. And that firm is a new model law firm that has joined forces with a law company called Elevate Services. And together, ElevateNext and Elevate Services really handle pretty much any legal issue, any solution that a customer would want that touches upon something going on in the legal industry. So our clients are both law departments as well as law firms, and addressing all sorts of legal issues on the Elevate side with technology, consulting, legal operations, staffing, full service in terms of what they can provide. And then the ElevateNext provides the practice of law aspect. So it's been a very exciting career, and looking forward to what the next few years bring.
Awesome. So I know, having been in legal services for a very long time, that the billable hour has always been a thorn in the side for clients. And
Yes.
it seems like, in fact, I know it is, after the Great Recession, it looked like a switch had flipped, that they were really pushing back.
Right.
Because they realized finally that they were really in the buyer's driver's seat, as it were, as far as how they controlled their legal spend. So I'm just curious, when you founded or co-founded Valorem, and you came out with these alternative fee arrangements, and you brought it to the market, how was it received from these large firms that you were working with?
Well, so do you mean from the client perspective, from large companies,
Yes,
or do you
exactly.
mean, okay, yeah. So the interesting thing, which I've come to learn possibly the hard way, is that while you often think of lawyers as really, they're the ones who change the laws, and so therefore lawyers are very amenable to change. The truth is that it's actually not quite that way in practice. So when we formed Valorem Law Group, actually, we got a lot of interest from people at the highest levels of large companies, general counsels, who were very interested in what the options are. But I would say that there is a fair amount of risk aversion that went along with it. And so while there was a lot of interest in finding out how this alternative fee thing would work, it took very innovative clients to really be the first to dip their toe in the water. And so what I would say is, what I expected to be a lot quicker of an adoption in the industry as a whole has taken a lot slower than I would have predicted.
And from the point of a GC who is now on the hook for their legal spend budget, what was some of their hesitancy to the change?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so it's really easy to pinpoint all of this, 10 years hindsight. But what I would say that we have come to conclude is that in the beginning, and luckily things have changed, but in the beginning, it's an entirely different mind shift to get your arms around alternative fees, in the sense that, unlike, let's just talk about litigation to start with. Unlike most pieces of litigation, a GC in a large company who gets a piece of litigation didn't really have to spend a whole lot of time thinking about, what does this case mean, and how are we going to handle it, and what are our goals. It really was just usually handed off to an associate GC, who then would reach out to their typical firm and say, hey, we got sued in so-and-so state, and I'm sending you the complaint. And that would be it. And then everybody would kind of have this understanding as to what would happen next, which is usually, that firm would be off to the races doing the typical things you would do in a piece of litigation, without really thinking through much more about the strategy. for alternative fees to work, first of all, our firm has always said from the beginning that for it to work for us and our clients, we always had some sort of bonus or holdback amount that was tied to the actual outcome of the case, so that our clients always knew that our goals were aligned with theirs, because a sizable amount of the fee would be tied up in whether we achieve the goals.
Right.
And so as a result, we had to vet the cases a lot more. And we also, in order to give an appropriate alternative fee, it's really necessary to have a sit down with your client and talk about what are the goals and, what does this case mean. So what it really meant was it required more time for the client at the front end than they were used to giving. And then they also always wondered, am I getting the short end of this deal? In other words, I think in the back of their minds, there was always this feeling of, what's the catch? How am I losing out here? Would I be better off with an alternative fee? And so it took clients a long time to sort of feel comfortable with a little bit of the mind shift in terms of how you would approach a case using an AFA.
And now?
And now, luckily, when you look back over 10 years, even if progress is slow, there still can be some very dynamic progress. And I think just by judging from the fact that pretty much any law firm in America, if you looked on their website or talked to some of the lawyers, they would tell you that they use alternative fees. It has been much more widely adopted now, certainly than it was 10 years ago. It is still quite inferior in terms of the amount that alternative fees are used compared to the billable hour. But what we're finding is more and more companies are demanding that their law firms and their lawyers go to this model, at least for a large amount of their cases. And so people are starting to become more comfortable with the use of AFAs, although I will tell you that AFAs are simply one tool to achieving cost savings and cost efficiency across the board.
Yeah. Well, I'm delighted to hear that it's moving forward, and that more firms are more receptive. Because I know when I was working in-house and working on RFPs consistently, that whole billing structure, fee structure piece of it was always a pickle to bring into alignment with client expectations and what they were really willing to consider an ongoing relationship. And so goodness the legal services that I've yet to have a real good explanation, or to hear a real good explanation as to why, as a business / profession, legal services is so slow to move forward with progress and change. I mean, I know the risk aversion part of it. I guess you get that in law school. I don't know, but it just doesn't make sense in corporate America.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
And so, but that's fascinating. So I have to ask, for the lawyer guests that we have on, why law? Why did you choose a career in law?
So interestingly, I had a degree in journalism when I came out of undergraduate. I went to University of Wisconsin in Madison, and I loved writing and things like that. I chose to pursue a job in public relations in Chicago after I graduated. And in doing that, it was something I actually really loved. But what I found that I had the most interest in was crisis PR. So if one of my clients was facing a crisis, that was the part that I really felt like, okay, this is the most interesting aspect of it. And I had always thought that I would, at one point, that I had an interest in law, but I didn't want to rush straight from undergraduate. But once I was doing public relations and I really saw myself gravitating to that aspect, I thought, you know what, I should do it. And so I went to law school, and I think I'm one of those few people who I loved law school. I really was sad when it was over because there were so many more classes that I wanted to take. I didn't like the work, but I really, once I got past the prerequisites that I didn't really want to take, like property.
Yeah.
Sorry, Professor Siegel, but that was torture. But once I got to select what I was interested in, I was really interested in learning about that area of the law. And so, most people say, "Oh, I went to make change and to pursue justice," and I did that, and I felt that, and I've been lucky enough in my career to be able to pursue that passion while I have my regular, sort of commercial career. But for me, it was really that I love to be able to advocate for a client, but also help parties get to a resolution that accomplishes a number of different things, which is usually, that not only there is a resolution of sorts, but that they keep in mind their reputations and the other business issues that go alongside with that. So for me, it was kind of a combination of the PR background as well as the interest in law.
Gotcha.
So,
It's
yep.
a wonderful combination. It's a wonderful combination because in the liberal arts of the journalism and PR, I mean, that was a lot of my educational background. There's so much writing, and you have to learn to adapt the style to the audience, whether it's journalism or PR or whatever. So it's a really nice precursor to what's going to be a lifelong career of writing and speaking.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
my stepdaughter actually has taken that same path.
Oh, great.
Yeah, she was just graduated, and she actually just started her first full-time legal job just a couple of weeks ago. So I'm interested. I mean, it's interesting for me to see her path unfold. So
I'll bet.
yeah.
Yeah.
So describe to our listeners, Nicole, if you would, what drives you as a serial entrepreneur, and several lessons you've learned along the way. Because you mentioned ElevateNext and Valorem. I mean, these are two separate companies that I want curious what your involvement in both. But that's no small feat for anybody.
Yeah. So it's not. I always had this entrepreneurial bend, and when you're in a large law firm, while there's some ability to flex that muscle, it largely remains unflexed. And so when I started Valorem, what I realized is that I just hate inefficiency. I'm the type of person who's constantly complaining about the way that they board planes because I find it to be the most inefficient process whatsoever. And I'm always like, gosh, if the door was in the middle, this would be so much easier, or,
Yeah.
all of those things. And so that was the same when I was in my practice in a large firm. It really infuriated me that because of the billable hour model, if you are creative, if you are efficient, if you figure out how to get the outcome that your client wants and maintain the high quality standards that you've, lived up to, but you get to that outcome sooner, you're less valuable to the firm because you've generated less hours and therefore less revenue in order to accomplish the goal that your client wanted. To me, that is the most contradictory thing ever. And I just really couldn't bear it any longer. And so the idea of forming a firm in order to kind of, provide a whole new alternative that just simply didn't exist in 2008 was really enticing to me. And I didn't even realize how enticing it was until we were in the throes of it. There's just this huge excitement around building something new, trying to break down old barriers, trying to shift mindsets, and really providing something that we think is of value to the industry.
That's
So that was the first thing with Valorem. And then with ElevateNext, there are a lot of lessons learned after 10 years of being, I think, what most people refer to as a disruptor in the industry. And and my partner Pat Lamb and I, kind of remembering what it was like and the excitement of all that, we also saw that the legal industry was starting to be more receptive to change. There's just so much that's going on in the industry right now, so many tech companies and so many alternative service providers, if you will. And we really felt that there might be an opportunity to do this one more time in an effective way. And we were very excited to do that. And so for the ElevateNext aspect, it's really our belief based on what we're seeing in the industry that law companies like Elevate Services, United Lex, other big companies that do a great deal in the legal department or for law firms, that they're really taking a huge chunk of the business that traditionally went to outside law firms or traditionally stayed in-house, and that it's this huge market that's opening up and will continue to open up, and we wanted to be a part of it.
Sure.
And as a traditional law firm, that doesn't usually happen unless you can think of a new model. And for us, that model was partnering with one of these law companies to provide something that also doesn't currently exist, and that's their ability to practice law through their affiliation with us. So it was just another opportunity to make the legal industry more efficient and to provide a service and a value to customers and clients that we didn't think existed.
That's fabulous. Fabulous. So how has that been personally, rewarding, gratifying to know that you're on the front end of driving change in your space?
It's incredibly rewarding, and it sometimes takes years before you see the fruits of that labor. So, for example, when I told my firm that I was leaving to start a new firm based on alternative fees in 2008, I had a number of people, including the managing partners of some of the offices, call me and tell me I'm insane and no one's ever going to talk about alternative fee arrangements. And so, but when you start something new, you're not sure, is this going to take off or is it not? And then, years later, it's very nice to get the type of awards in the industry that indicate that the leap of faith you took was actually a good one. But just from a pure personal standpoint, because it's not based on awards that you get, it's not based on, the money that you may get if you're successful in building a business. For me, it's really personally exciting and gratifying to build a team of people who feel the same way and who just get a charge out of what they're trying to do. And we have an amazing team at ElevateNext, as we did and do at Valorem. And it also, I really get excited about being exposed to new people and new situations that are, in the beginning outside of my comfort zone. And so our affiliation with Elevate has given us access to a company that has 1,200 global employees. And I am lucky enough to interact with people on various continents and people doing all different things with all different skill sets and in all different time zones. And that's just something I didn't have the ability to do with a relatively small law firm in Chicago. So that has just broadened my horizons. And whenever you meet a number of diverse people, I think just from a personal standpoint, you benefit.
Absolutely.
So I have.
That is phenomenal. That is so phenomenal. And it's just so exciting to hear, that you had this drive, you adapted it to in-house law firms, and then you saw opportunity. You continued to stay true in your integrity for what you find rewarding and how to use those skill sets that you had developed under the tutelage of, I'm sure, some great mentors or some great leaders in your firm that you left that had, kind of shown you the ropes and helped you hone your craft. And now look what you've done, right? I mean, I think it's a wonderful model, particularly for women, because we don't always have mentors and models given in male-dominated firms and
Right.
male-dominated professions. So I guess my next question, Nicole, would be, as a woman business owner, how do you approach business development for these two entities?
Yeah, that's a good question and something that I've thought about a lot. So I'm really passionate about women's issues, and we ElevateNext just actually got certified in the last few weeks as a majority woman-owned business.
Woohoo!
And yeah, that's been great, and it's personally gratifying as well, just because I've put so much time and effort into what we've built over the past years. Um, I think women develop business very differently than men, and I think that the reason for that has been in large part because in male dominated industries, at least when I was growing up in a large law firm, not overtly, but often the informal opportunities, like simply, playing golf and chatting or building relationships by just spending time with people, were often opportunities that women didn't have, simply because they didn't find themselves in that environment or being invited into that environment that often. Or, a male partner would just more naturally bring on a male associate, or bring them to lunch with a client, etc. And as a result, I think business development opportunities organically came from those relationships, and women weren't as often, having a proverbial seat at the table. I happen to think, and when I look at my client roster, it is really not because I have aimed my marketing at women, but I find that the best way to develop business is by being genuine as to who you are, and having deeper relationships with people. And often that happens with women. And so, as it turns out, some of my best clients are really, really amazing women who often I started with when we were really both very young in the industry. They were maybe in their first in-house job, and I did a little bit of work maybe as an associate. And then over time, we just developed a relationship, a personal relationship, that also allowed us to grow together professionally. But having said that, I mean, I market to a lot of men. I do a lot of pitches. I do work for a lot of men, and I think, my approach is really just showcasing what it is that we can do. I have no concerns about the quality of our work and our ability to achieve really amazing things. So my philosophy has always been, if we can just get our foot in the door, then then everything's great. And that's sort of the philosophy that I have projected in terms of my marketing efforts as well. So I try to just showcase what we're doing and why we think that's different and why we think we could help. And where we don't think we can help, we're very upfront about that. I don't like to take on matters that aren't in our sweet spot, or I don't like to take things on simply because we want the name, that client or, that business. I've always thought that if we do what we do and we do it really well, then clients will come back to us. And that has proven the case over time.
Wonderful. Wonderful. That's such a wonderful testimonial of how to develop a prosperous business. It's a great role model for so many women coming behind you, and men for that matter. But women, we just need that we just need to open the fields and lift as we climb, and clearly
That's right.
You built your reputation and your profession on that.
Thank you. And I the most amazing thing is just seeing how many women are now finally getting into the roles where they have the ability to give out business, because that's a huge part of it. So that's very exciting to watch.
Yes. So with all of that, all the accomplishment, all the mentoring, all of the alignment with women clients, and forward facing of business development, you've done and accomplished so much. And I'm just curious, at this point in your career, what does success look like for you?
Well, I'm standing in a really cool office that took me a really long time to get, and it's cool only because um, it's it's filled with like it's got a brick wall and high ceilings and a big oversized orange chair and fun pillows that say she believes she could, so she did, and things like that. So success for me actually is really, it used to be measured in like how much money did you make and all those things that you wanted to attain. And what I've learned in what I call my old age, which I hope I'm not overly dating myself because I still have many years to work in this profession. But success for me is really just as you said before, feeling like I have contributed to the legal industry, that I have, brought together a good team and that people look forward to coming to work and they're excited about what we're doing. For me, just feeling fulfilled and feeling like I'm enjoying what I'm doing and I'm meeting new people and challenging, the parameters that I feel used to constrain me, getting introduced to new people or traveling to new places or taking on a new matter that's in an area that I previously didn't have experience in. All of that is success to me. So I think at the end of the day, I'd have to just say that it's autonomy. It's the ability and really the blessing and the luck and the, I don't know, fortitude, I think, to be at a place where I have some ability to dictate, what I'm taking on and how my day-to-day life is unfolding.
Wonderful. Well, that is certainly worthwhile and enviable goals to attain. Because I know from one, my world too, I was in house for many years before starting my firm, that autonomy, flexibility, and freedom doesn't just happen.
That's right. That's right.
We have to
Right. And I've
drive
been,
that.
yeah, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say we have to drive that train right to where we want it to go if we want to accomplish that, and all the while doing it, as they say, in backwards in high heels, of delivering to our clients, right?
Yeah, that's right. And people always say that women are very, instead of simply taking a compliment, they're often the ones saying, well, it's my team, and instead, saying, oh, well, I was lucky. And so I did use the word luck, and then I sort of, chided myself. But I think it's a combination of all of those. And yes, we have to be the ones to drive it, but you can never do it if you don't have a really amazing team around you. And I do think a little bit of luck is always helpful.
The convergence of
Yeah,
opportunity and preparation.
exactly, exactly.
Well, this has been fascinating. I have one more question, which is a little bit of a philosophical question that we always love to ask our guest. So no more on the legal, but just from the mindset of, if you could give your younger self one piece of professional advice, what would that be?
Go for it. Yeah, it would be go for it. I mean, I think, I stayed in my large firm for 15 years. And as I said, it was a really, really great environment. I learned a lot. But part of me wonders if that was just fear, if it was that, if you get into a very comfortable situation, you have a really nice salary that you can depend on, you know the routine, you know the people that you're working with, you generally know what's going to happen on a day-to-day basis, and it's very easy to feel comfortable in that. And I remember when I was contemplating starting Valorem Law Group, I was the sole woman of 4 founding partners, and I was the last to agree to come on. And I'm pretty sure that was because I was, either afraid, or I just felt like, oh gosh, why do I want to risk this really solid place and solid position? And then once I took that leap of faith, I never looked back. And I was like, why did I wait this long? Only because it was so fulfilling. So I would tell myself, go for it, maybe a little bit earlier than I did, though as I said, I have no regrets as to the way that my career has played out.
Wonderful. Well, Nicole, thank you so much. We certainly appreciate it. This has been a fascinating conversation. I love to talk with women who have, had the vision, they found the fortitude, they had the courage to step out of their comfort zone, and that really drove them to create the career of their dreams. And that's what I'm all about helping women to do by charting their own course, because it certainly doesn't happen automatically. So thank you very much, Nicole, and we thank you to our listeners for another episode.